Okay, back again. Today I'm making a video on a laptop that I found at the thrift store for, let me see if I can get it in the shot here. I picked this up at Value Village, if the camera will focus, hopefully there's not too much light, for $12.12. This is a Gateway Solo 1150 laptop from the year 2000. Now you're probably thinking, Gateway, well, what a crappy brand, right? Well, for those of you who are thinking that, you probably didn't grow up. You probably didn't grow up with the rest of the millennials. The Gateway was actually a very popular brand back in the 90s and early 2000s. They made quality products, and I think B. Bishop PCM said this on his channel. They made custom computers. They used custom motherboards so you could build pretty much anything you wanted. It was almost like building your own computer back in the day. As for laptops, though, the Solo 1150 was one of Gateway's next generation laptops, and we'll see why in a minute. But this laptop was basically saved from recycling. And was saved being destroyed. I almost thought it was a lost cause, and I'll explain why in a minute, but it actually is a decent laptop. And being from the era when Gateway, if a lot of the little kids might remember the Gateway store, I still have a plush cow, because I was a little kid when my parents bought a Gateway computer from the Gateway store. A lot of people remember Gateway as a golden stamp in the name of computers. So we'll go ahead and take a look around this thing and see what it has to offer. Get the camera off the tripod here. Alright, so let's take a look. So on the front we have the LCD latch with the push button latch. Go ahead and zoom out a little bit. Zoomed in a little bit, that's a little weird. On this side we have the optical drive, which is just a standard, I believe it's a 4X CDRW drive. We have a 56K, I believe that's a 56K telephone modem, which you certainly do not see on laptops nowadays. A USB 1.1 port. On the back we have the Kensington lock, which no one uses. A missing screw hole, which is right there. We have another USB 1.1 port. We have our headphone and microphone TRS jacks here. We have a VGA out with the screws, which is always nice. That way you don't have to worry about your VGA cable falling out. Your DC input jack here. And then on this side you have your dual PCMCIA card slots, although the bottom one does not work on this model. Then we have a 3.5-inch floppy drive on this side, which you certainly do not see on modern laptops. Now, what do you notice about this laptop that's missing that most laptops from this era would have? It's missing a lot of legacy I/O, such as serial and parallel, and that's why this laptop was considered next generation, because it didn't have serial, parallel, or any other, or even a PS2 port for your mouse. I had an IBM ThinkPad iSeries 1161 laptop from the same year, October 2000, which was when this machine was built, and it had serial, parallel, and a PS2 mouse port. Unfortunately, the screen hinges snapped because the laptop was old, and that's one of IBM's cheaper ThinkPads, one of their economy ThinkPads, if you will. And it didn't quite work out. So here's the laptop with the LCD open. And one thing I really love about older laptops is the keyboards. This is actually has a very nice scissor switch keyboard. And while it may not be a full-size keyboard, it's certainly better than the keyboards that you see on modern laptops, which usually feel very stiff. The one thing I don't like about these kinds of keyboards is how they have the home button right next to the backspace key, and there's no bezel in between them, because oftentimes if I make a typo, I end up hitting both backspace and home at the same time, and it advances the cursor to the beginning of the sentence, so that can be kind of annoying. Then down here you have a pretty good sized trackpad with your left and right click buttons. Obviously, this was before they had multi-gesture trackpads, or the trackpads with the scrolling implemented. So it's pretty good for a year 2000 trackpad. And something else kind of unusual is you have a cooling grill right here, which this is actually where the CPU is. I've actually had to take this apart to get to clean the fan, because the fan was extremely dusty when I got this. But the CPU sits right here, and then there's a heat sink, and then the fan's right here. Up here you also have multimedia buttons for email, web, help, and I guess that would be your instant messaging application for Internet Relay Chat, or IRC. What's kind of funny though is that this icon, I'll zoom in on it a little bit, get some better lighting, looks just like, focus, come on, there we go. It looks just like the user account picture in Windows 10, and this was 15 years before Windows 10 came out. Then you also have your speakers here, which sound like crap. Alright, so we'll get the camera positioned here, and now we'll go ahead and turn this laptop on. Now, while it's booting up, I'll tell a little story, because when I got this laptop at the thrift store, I originally thought that it didn't have any RAM. It had the hard drive, but it did not have any RAM installed. So I grabbed a 128 megabyte module out of my spare parts collection and threw it in. But the weird thing was, it kept giving me a beep code when I plugged it in. I didn't get an AC adapter with it, but I had one lying around, so I think it's an HP. No, it's actually a Light-On, my bad. It's a Light-On AC adapter that I used to use with another old laptop of mine. But for whatever reason, it was not passing the post. It was not passing the power on self-test when I first got this laptop. It kept giving me a beep code, and at first I thought it was because it didn't like the RAM I put into it. I had 228 megabyte sticks of SD RAM, and it's seeking the floppy drive because I used a floppy to install the core part of Windows ME, and then I installed it from a CD. It was part of a failed experiment to use an OEM pre-installation floppy, but that's for later. That's a story for later. Yeah, and it wouldn't take the RAM, but then I googled the beep code, and I found out it was really weird. Apparently, if the battery is not able to take a charge or hold a charge, the laptop won't post. And removing the battery fixed the problem. I tried every RAM stick I had, and it kept giving me the same beep code. But then I tried putting a different battery. I took the battery out and just ran it off the AC power, and it worked just fine. So I have never seen that in a laptop before. But anyways, when I got it, it had Windows 2000 on it. But of course, the people who owned it before thought that taking the RAM out would erase the hard drive, which it clearly does not do. What happened? So when I put the RAM in, it booted into apparently had been wiped with Windows 2000. They wiped the original install of Windows ME because that's what it originally came with. And they installed Windows 2000 Pro with Service Pack 4. Of course, it did have all their data on there, so I did them the favor of wiping the drive and putting Windows ME back on, because Windows 2000, for a 550 MHz Intel Celeron, which is the CPU it has, it wasn't running too well. And for a Celeron, Windows ME is more appropriate, because this was not really intended to be a business laptop. This was more of a personal home work office laptop. It was more of a personal laptop than a business laptop. So when this was new. So it also, I'll keep going with the specs. I'm assuming it probably had 64 or 96 megabytes of RAM when it was new. It currently has 128 megs, because that's all I had on hand. I don't have much SODIMM SD RAMs lying around. And it has a 6 gigabyte hard drive, IBM TravelStar hard drive. And of course it has, I forgot what the manufacturer of the video was. I think it was the Lynx 3D. You know what? Let me go to the device manager and we'll see for yourself. Okay, yeah. Let me zoom in on that. So here's the device manager. If I can get it to focus. It has a Silicon Motion Lynx 3DM. You certainly do not see this on modern laptops. And as for audio, let's go ahead and see. It has AC link audio, which is pretty standard. Of course, when I got this machine, for whatever reason, the previous owners did not install an audio driver for Windows 2000, so I had to hunt one down, and it took me a while. I had to, because obviously Gateway no longer has the drivers on their website for this laptop, so I had to hunt them down on someone's FTP server, and I finally found them. And with the exception of the modem driver, that's the one device it didn't pick up was the modem. And that driver apparently was no longer available when I clicked on it, and all the other websites were just fake driver websites that contained malware. So, and it was good for my scan baiting part of my channel though, because I mean it gives me numbers to call and put down in my log. But yeah, Windows ME actually runs very well on here. I mean, it was its native operating system, and I've installed some software on here. I've installed my copy of Microsoft Office 2000 Premium on here, and you can clearly see that Word loads up very quickly. As you can see, programs start very quickly. Word fired right up, and oh, there was a problem starting the Office Assistant. Well, I guess I'm gonna have to reinstall that, but that's okay. That means Clippy won't come up and annoy you. But this computer also has. I tried to install a wireless adapter on this computer, but it wouldn't work. I mean, as you can see, I have an SMC wireless card bus adapter here, but for whatever reason, it just wouldn't work. I mean, I tried everything from reinstalling the driver, and I think I've come to the conclusion that the PCMCIA card slots on this laptop just don't work. Oh well, but that's pretty much Windows on here. As you can see, Windows runs pretty well on here. Probably not put Windows XP on here. I had thought about doing that, but putting XP on here would basically be suicide for this laptop because it's only a 550 MHz Celeron. Oh, that's what I also wanted to do, was pull up the specs. Move that there, and I'll zoom in on it so you can see. Let's see, it's Windows ME, Intel Celeron CPU. It doesn't show the clock speed, but it's a 550 megahertz Celeron, and it shows 192 megabytes of RAM. That's interesting. I thought I put 128 in there, but it's showing 192, so maybe it has some onboard RAM that I'm not aware of. But we'll go ahead and reboot this, and I'll go into the BIOS so you can see even more of the specs. Alright, we'll go into setup here. And we'll zoom out because that's way too far zoomed in. So I'll point the camera down there. Okay, yeah, there's 640K onboard memory and 100, and so that's why. And then down there you can see the CPU speed of 550 megahertz. So it's a good computer. It's a good vintage computer. You could definitely run Windows 98 on here. So if you have old DOS games, like if you have games for Windows 98, we'll just go ahead and exit without saving. I'll have to wait for it to reboot here, and then we'll just shut it down. Can we not shut down? There we go. Okay, I was gonna say. But for a 17-year-old laptop, it isn't half bad, and it was a pretty nice thrift store find. So there you have it, the Gateway Solo 1150 from 2000.